Hello y'all, this is Louie and welcome back to Retrosaurus. Today I'm taking a bit of a detour from my original plan of gushing over Dino Crisis, don't you worry your sweet little face, that episode is still coming, to vent my frustrations over one of the worst yet highly beloved games in the Nintendo 64 library, Donkey Kong 64. Based on what my chat has told me on Twitch, you should follow me on there, Donkey Kong 64 is an amazing game that's chock full of diverse minigames and content that just hearing the phrase, "Welcome to bonus stage," hits people with all the nostalgic feels from their childhood. I mean, I can't deny that I have a bit of nostalgia for this game. The DK rap itself is legendary, and Lanky Kong memes were a hot commodity several years back, though sadly their value has tanked in recent years. But nostalgia alone cannot save this game from the truth of its sorry, sad existence. The praise and love for this game only seems to hold up until you find out most players have never completed the game, or even at the very least only completed a minimal amount of content needed to fight the final boss. Now, if you're like me, you don't really have much experience with this title, as you only had about 2 or 3 games to your name as a child in the late 90s, and I am not ready to throw Snowboard Kids 2 under the bus just yet. Looking back, I think I only played about an hour or so of this when I borrowed it from my cousin, who quickly wanted it back for some godforsaken reason. Come to think of it, I don't think I even owned the RAM expansion for the system until late in high school. Do you remember that little red and black box that plugged into your system? Remember needing to get more RAM for your console so it could play like 5 more games, most of dubious quality? Anyway, I've decided to revisit this game thanks to a community member gifting me the game on the Wii U eShop, and holy shit, I don't think I've ever been so disappointed by a Nintendo game in my life. Well, that is unless we count the most recent Paper Mario titles and an unnamed Zelda entry that looks like the art style was ripped directly from Ghost Vibration of all games. So today I'm going to be a bit more ranty with an understandably cathartic look at how Donkey Kong 64 is one of the least gratifying collectathons I have ever had the displeasure of experiencing. As Donkey Kong is somewhat of a household name and an international celebrity, let's forego our usual background on the character's origins, as that could be an entire video in of itself. Instead, we'll be looking at the Rare era of Donkey Kong, starting with the DK Country series, alongside their more notable 3D platformers like Banjo-Kazooie. It's worth mentioning that the current team that works under the Rare name is not the same group that is responsible for many of the games you know and love from childhood. Many of those developers moved on to start their own studio, known as Polytonic Games of Yooka-Laylee fame, or infamy. It really depends on who you're talking to and which of their games is being referenced, to be honest. Rare's history with the Donkey Kong license began following a successful partnership with Nintendo in the NES era that produced many hit classics such as Battletoads. More creative freedom was granted to them after earning their trust with key figures at Nintendo, though most notably Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of the original Donkey Kong. Their success with the company would continue into the Super Nintendo era, where they were approached to revive the DK brand after its dormancy following Donkey Kong 3's failure in the 80s, or maybe it was the early 90s, I kinda forgot. After some redesigns and reworks, Rare produced Donkey Kong Country, a radical departure from the series' roots, implementing 3D-like character models and tight platforming controls. The series would spawn 2 additional sequels under Rare's banner, in addition to a companion series for the Game Boy known as Donkey Kong Land. Even after the developers' acquisition by Microsoft, they continued to make original titles and ports for the Nintendo Game Boy Advance and DS lines. As they transitioned into 3D design with the introduction of the N64, Rare was one of the few developers who were able to replicate the success and quality of Super Mario 64, starting with Banjo-Kazooie, albeit with their own twist and added flavor. So it was only natural that they would give the same treatment to the DK license, as they were the most familiar with the franchise and the then modern 3D development. It is really hard to talk about DK64 without bringing up the Banjo series, as in many ways the two series share the same DNA and design philosophy. Early in the N64 lifecycle, Rare released a god-awful racing game by the name of Diddy Kong Racing, which featured 2 characters who would go on to star in their own games, Banjo the Bear and then Conker the Squirrel. Interestingly enough, Banjo was not initially planned to be the titular character in his own game, at least according to my friend, who we can definitely trust because I don't feel like looking it up. Starting most notably with Donkey Kong Country, Rare's games have always had a collectathon approach to their core designs. In DK Country and DK Land, you were constantly grabbing every banana, metal, balloon, golden statue, and Kong letter you came across in a level to hit that sweet, sweet rush of achieving 100%. This would evolve into what we consider to be a collectathon by even modern standards, and has stayed relatively the same since the 90s. For those who may be unfamiliar with the term, collectathons are games which feature a plethora of items of varying importance that players are tasked with nabbing as they run through the game. Early ideas of this in a 3D game can be found in Super Mario 64, where you're looking for stars and multicolored coins. Banjo-Kazooie took this a step further, with basic stars and red and blue coins being replaced by jiggies and music notes respectively, while adding consumables such as feathers, jinjos, eggs, shut up Zach, and character upgrades provided by honeycomb pieces and mumbo tokens. All these items were found either scattered around the world or earned by completing challenges that more or less felt natural to their respective levels in the world. Occasionally you'd come across a jiggy that would be too difficult to get at the time, but often a later upgrade would make it easier to get. In the first game alone, there were 100 jiggies for the player to collect, though less were needed to complete the main game. I can go on and on about collectibles, as Banjo-Tooie would continue to add more and more pickups to fill out the increasingly larger worlds. Now, whether or not you consider this style of game to be fun is definitely down to your own personal taste. Though if you say anything bad about Tooie, I swear to heck I will rain hellfire down from the sky. So where does DK64 fit into all of this? Well, honestly, it fits somewhere in the middle, as it was released between the first two Banjo games. Hot off the heels of the success of Banjo-Kazooie, Rare would release DK64 as a follow-up the following year. Donkey himself, alongside his nephew, Diddy, would return, accompanied by 3 new members of the DK crew. Tiny, who is deceptively similar to Dixie Kong, Lanky, who looks like a clown and a farmer produce an unholy simian offspring, and Crunchy Kong. Honestly, don't have much to say about that last guy, aside from my inability to recall his name. Apparently, all 3, or at the very least 2 of those characters have been quietly iced by Nintendo in a post-Barrel Blast world, as the DK rap has been edited to remove references to their existence in the Super Smash Bros. Series. Naturally, the DK crew would need their own set of collectibles and gameplay to match their world. As I mentioned, there are 5 playable characters to choose from, each with their own movement and gameplay to differentiate themselves from each other. Donkey Donks, Diddy Dids, Tiny Tines, Lanky Lanks, and Crunky Crunks. Unlike its predecessor Banjo-Kazooie and even DKC, each character had their own color-coded set of collectibles in every location in the game. Some areas would require a certain character to perform a special action, to open a path for another to progress. Honestly, I didn't think much of this when I heard it described to me, as if you're just casually playing through the game, you'll get more than enough stuff to unlock the gate for the final world. But that was until I started playing the game for the coveted 101% mark. The method for unlocking golden bananas is a stark contrast to the more fluid and natural design of Banjo 1's Jiggy acquisition, as the introduction of more playable characters added an entire level of questionable design decisions. After several hours with this game, the realization set in with how tedious this game would be, not only to achieve 101%, but to play in general. The game is steeped heavily in rose-tinted nostalgia that really makes me wonder how many people actually have fond memories of this game, and how many people have mistaken this game for like Super Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie. Heck, even my girlfriend tried to debate me on this game, only to find out she misremembered the name of DK Country. Now, without further ado, we are throwing objectivity out the window as we hop on the complaint train to pick apart this tedious nightmare of a game. The amount of collectibles in this game is maddening. Now you only need 100 bananas to reach the final level, which initially has a 10-minute timer unless you find all the blueprints in the game. Blueprints each earn you 1 golden banana, plus adding 1 minute to the timer in the final level. You also need to complete 2 additional Nintendo and Rare games that they decided to include, DK Arcade and Jetpack respectively, to earn a Nintendo and a Rare coin to fight the final boss. But if you're going for the full 101%, you need to get near everything in the game save for small bananas and colorful medals. Though you will need both to earn golden banana medals and pay for upgrades, which makes them somewhat required. For the sake of brevity, I will just list all of these upgrades and collectibles on the screen so you can read them quietly to yourself. You probably will have to pause the video because there is a lot of them. Let's talk about the Kong family real quick. There are 5 playable characters and each character has 1 weapon. It has upgrades. There's an instrument with them with more upgrades. There's health upgrades for the team, and there are 3 individual potion abilities for each character, despite the fact they're all the same ability, but you have to earn them separately for some reason. And then stuff you have to learn from the banana fairies and such like that. As for collectibles, there are 7 main worlds plus the hub world, and then a couple collectibles in the final level, but overall there's not that many there. I've bolded everything required to complete the game to 101%. Now, just a side note here, I actually wrote this entire script before I finished the game on stream, which I did get everything, so later things in the script might sound a little odd. By getting everything in the game, there is additional content you unlock. There are 18 unique types of minigames in the game, called bonus stages with several levels of difficulty. There is a multiplayer battle mode, there's a boss rush, and there's also unlockable cheat bonuses, music, art, etc. Even after this, I'm leaving out the consumable items in the game, because there's always health, 2 types of ammo, crystal coconuts, or bombs to pick up along the way, and everything makes its own sound. Luckily, most of that stuff is team-based, or else I'd be having another word with the lead designer of the game, who is an unrepentant butt munch. Now that may not seem all that bad, but it's how the collectibles and personal items are earned that is the true source of this game's tedious nature. You start with only Donkey Kong and soon unlock Diddy Kong, who unlocks Tiny, who unlocks Lanky, who unlocks Crampy. Once you get each character, you need to get their gun, which is a separate trip to Funky's shop. Each ability and instrument requires a separate trip to Cranky or Candy's shops respectively. Once you're in a level, you'll often need to play as one character to open a door to get a couple bananas to open another gate for the previous character to walk through to hit a switch for yet another character to continue. It's maddening how often you need to return to the tag barrel just to switch back to the character you just had. Honestly, if you could swap characters on the fly from a menu, this game's quality would increase tenfold. But the real offender, the most irritating and mind-numbing source of all the tedious bullshit this game has to offer, comes in the form of the way you earn golden bananas and arcade coins. The truest, most pure form of disrespect a developer can have for their players comes from the lack of respect for the player's time and ability. And I know what you're saying, this is a children's game from the 90s. No one cared about how frustrating or poorly designed a game was, as long as little Absidy was preoccupied and out of your hair for a few hours. But I can honestly never forgive a game for being intentionally poorly designed. I can forgive some bad design quirks based on the age of the game or the limitations of the hardware or the engine, but when it's intentionally made to be difficult for no real reason but to pad out a game or waste time, all bets are off. Think back to Banjo-Kazooie for a moment. You have one playable character unit who can collect everything in the game by using different abilities you learn in each world. The game even notifies you when you enter a world that there is a move you need to acquire to move along. You earn jiggies from completing challenges or finding them around levels with relative fluidity. You can even open additional worlds before completing other ones, so there's always something to do if you get stuck. In short, you don't run into many roadblocks or mechanics that keeps the game from moving along smoothly. When it comes to DK64 though, you will constantly run into roadblocks that require you to backtrack to earlier levels, bringing the game to a screeching halt. Unlocked a new character? Better run back to the first level to get their ability and weapon. Need a new move to unlock a path for a golden banana? Well, hopefully you made it far enough in the story for Cranky to let you buy it. It takes quite some time for the game to open up to the point where you aren't scrambling back and forth to make the scotiest of a skosh of progress, only to find yet another round of beaver bother to make you throw the controller across the room. And speaking of beaver bother, the minigames you are required to play to earn golden banana feature the most disrespectful forms of gameplay I have ever experienced. The minigames initially aren't too bad in the early levels, save for a few minecart levels that will always be the bane of my existence. But by the third and fourth levels, they begin to range from rage-inducing to downright fucking impossible. The mechanics and controls for each minigame are not even close to fair for many of these terribly designed abominations they passed off as gameplay. Whether the controls are stiff or unresponsive, or the developers seem to just expect to know how to complete the game, so many of these technical abortions should have never been created. At several points during my streams, people were looking at the original paperback guides from childhood to try and solve some of these brain busters for me. And spoiler alert, they rarely gave any useful information. I've been told by many that the issues with my experience with the game stem from the lag caused by the Wii U emulation of the Wii emulation of N64 games, which was never really stellar. And to that I say, go heck yourself. This is what I have experienced, and I can't imagine that this is all that different from the original cartridge, as it holds the Nintendo seal of approval. Unless the seal of approval was actually just a bunch of corporate bullheck to trick customers into buying official products and deter cheaper games from being produced and sold to the public. Oh. Now I can, and I may in another video, point out how downright terrible the designs of each of these minigames are and rank them from worst to even more worst. I'm still workshopping the video, I'm sorry. So how did this game release in such a sorry state, especially given its pedigree in the hands of Rare? The game scored very high with critics and was even awarded a Best of E3 title the year it released. I have to be missing something that nearly everyone else in 1999 seemed to love about the game. Looking back at its marketing and promotion, the game was touted to be the biggest DK adventure ever. After games like Super Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie set high standards for 3D platforming in larger worlds with more and more content, Donkey Kong 64 would have to blow them out of the water. And you can see that indeed it was even larger in scale and density of content than its predecessors. I'll list all the content included in the game on screen once again, and it's plain as day that you will be spending heaps of time playing it if you want to see everything there is to see. With all this content in the game, it must have been in development for several years, right? According to the Wikipedia article, I know. Development started in 1997 but was restarted halfway through development before ultimately releasing in 1999. This was only 1 year after Banjo-Kazooie came out and several team members from that game were pulled in to work on DK64. Judging by the game's quality, I can only imagine development for this game was rushed after restarting development, which honestly makes sense as so much of the content is simply reused several times over. It's easy to cut corners by reusing minigames and resources by simply rendering them in a different color to make them stand out so they don't look too similar like the dwarves on level 4 and the elves on level 6. The game was also prone to a memory leak crash during development, which they were never able to identify the source. This prompted the inclusion of the expansion pack for free just to keep the game running as well as it does, and it most certainly does not run well. The game is ridden with glitches and bugs, which yeah, is not unique to this title alone, especially compared to other N64 games in general, but let me have this one as I'm still reeling from all the BS this game threw at me. It's definitely not a technical masterpiece in any sense, but I guess they did deliver on the promises of being the biggest and most content-heavy game to date. Now, I finally did finish DK64 and to 101%, which I gave up on at one point but came back to once I realized how close I was. If I had to give this game a score based on a scale of 1 to 3, this game is easily a hesitant 1 on that scale because it doesn't go any lower. Retrosaurus is not a review show, but I wanted you all to know that. I don't like being all doom and gloom and negative in this series, but it's very rare when I come across a game that is so maddening and life-consuming that I feel the need to vent my frustrations in a way that is more well thought out and more concise instead of crying on stream and saying it's not fair, like a child who was given a bar of Hershey's milk chocolate instead of a proper form of candy. I am starting to worry that these criticisms will come back to bite me in the ass once I revisit Banjo-Tooie, as rare games seem to enjoy repeating their mistakes without learning anything. But until then, just remember, DK64 is terrible, and nostalgia is keeping this game alive when it should be dead and buried. I'm looking forward to finally putting this game to bed and never playing it again, as it has caused so much anxiety and stress for me in the past 2 weeks. After playing through this game, I truly believe the reason we millennials are so jaded and depressed jerks is due to the existence of Donkey Kong 64. Alright, that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Retrosaurus. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell for alerts to keep up with all the new content I have coming. A like and a comment go a long way, so let me know in the comments what you thought. Now, this series is supported by everyone on Patreon, so if you're interested in supporting it, there is a link in the description, or you can search for KyoryuHunter on there and you will find me quite easily. And speaking of finding me, you can find me on all social media networking at KyoryuHunter on Twitch, Twitter, MySpace even, YouTube, Patreon, and once again, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time here on Retrosaurus.